It was the winter of 1871, and the fog had wrapped the village of Windermere like a damp shroud. The townspeople kept themselves that season, whispering of strange sounds in the woods and lights dancing above the moors. But for Jonathan Reeves, a 42-year-old solicitor from London, the season was defined not by superstition, but by a letter. It arrived in an envelope yellowed with age, the wax seal cracked and curling at the corners. The handwriting was immaculate yet peculiar, with flourishes that hadn't been in fashion for decades. It was an invitation, unexpected and unsigned, to spend a fortnight at Whitmore Manor, an estate near Windermere he'd never heard of before. The only line in the offered context read, "You are the last to know the truth. Come before the frost claims it all." Jonathan wasn't the type to chase mysteries, but something about the letter gripped him. Perhaps it was the scent of lavender ink, faint but haunting. Or perhaps, he later admitted, it was the loneliness that had crept in after Margaret's passing. So, with his satchel and walking stick, he boarded the morning carriage and rode north, toward the fog and toward Whitmore. The manor stood like a relic from another time. 3 stories of stone and soot, its once white exterior blackened by the weight of decades. The windows stared out like hollow eyes, curtains unmoving. As Jonathan approached, the driver who had brought him there muttered, "You sure, sir? Folks say it watches you back." Jonathan managed a nervous chuckle, brushing it off, but his breath caught as the front door creaked open before he even knocked. No one stood behind it. The air that drifted out was still and cold, not the crispness of the outdoors, but something older, the kind of cold that seeped into your teeth. Inside, the manor was furnished as if it hadn't missed a single day since 1820. Oil lamps glowed dimly, though no one had lit them. The wallpaper peeled in places, revealing floral prints that hadn't seen daylight in years. A grand staircase loomed before him, its wooden railings smooth and oddly warm to the touch. Jonathan called out, but his voice sounded swallowed by the silence. That night, he was given a guest room on the 2nd floor, lavishly decorated, though the bed had dust in its creases. A fire burned in the hearth, despite no servant in sight. He tried to convince himself it was all prepared in advance. He was wrong. The second night brought no peace. Jonathan awoke not to a sound, but to its absence. The fire had gone cold, yet the window had frosted shut. He reached for his robe, but froze, because from the hallway came footsteps. Soft, slow, deliberate. He held his breath. They stopped directly outside his door. No knock, no sound, just presence. Jonathan, heart pounding, approached the door and opened it. Nothing. The hallway was empty. The candles along the corridor had gone out. He took a few steps and turned, only to see a faint handprint on the inside of his door, small and unmistakably wet. He returned to bed that night, clutching the Bible from the bedside drawer, though he hadn't touched one in years. Sleep did not come. On the 4th day, in an effort to calm his nerves and understand the manor, Jonathan explored. At the end of the west wing, behind a pair of velvet curtains, he discovered a locked door. Oddly, his key fit. The room beyond was lined with portraits. Dozens, perhaps over 100, all in frames so dusty it was hard to see the faces. But what struck him cold was that every subject bore the same expression, a wide, strained smile, and eyes that seemed wrong. One painting in the center caught his breath. It was of him, Same clothes, same facial hair, same tired eyes. But he had never sat for such a painting. He stepped closer. Beneath the canvas was a nameplate. It read, Jonathan Reeves, guest number 73. He backed away slowly. As he turned, he swore he saw the eyes of the painted version of himself move. That evening, shaken and pale, Jonathan descended to the dining hall hoping to find someone, anyone, to talk to. The long mahogany table was set for one. Steam rose from a bowl of stew. Bread, still warm. A decanter of red wine. No servant in sight. He sat hesitantly, appetite battling fear. The chair creaked as he settled in, and then the chandelier above began to sway gently. As he reached for the spoon, a whisper drifted in the air. Eat, guest. He dropped the spoon. It clattered loudly, and in that instant the chandeliers stopped. The air was still again. He stood, suddenly breathless, and backed out of the room, the stew still steaming behind him. On the 7th night, Jonathan found a small wooden box on the floor outside his door. Inside were letters, some dating back to 1799, each from someone who had stayed at the manor. Each letter was a plea. I hear the voices. They know I read their names. The portraits change every night. I'm not alone in my skin. Don't drink the wine. It remembers things. The last letter had no name, only a final trembling line. It wants to become you. It learns. Run. The mirror in his room had been covered with a sheet since day one. That night, drawn by some instinct or madness, Jonathan pulled the sheet down. The man in the mirror looked like him, but not quite. The reflection blinked when he didn't, moved a little too late, and when Jonathan lifted his hand, the reflection raised the opposite one, too eagerly. Then it smiled, a wide, unnatural smile. Jonathan screamed, not from fear, from knowing deep down that whatever smiled from that glass wanted out. He covered the mirror again, but it was too late. His reflection stayed smiling beneath the sheet. He tried to leave the next morning, packed his things, went down to the front door. There was no handle, no keyhole, just a wall of wood where a door once was. He ran to the windows, now bricked from the outside. His breath caught as he turned and saw, on the wall beside the door, a new painting. His painting, older now, paler, but still him. A gold plate beneath it read, Jonathan Reeves, resident. Jonathan no longer sleeps, not because of fear, but because dreams feel too real now. He hears music in the walls, sees guests in the mirrors. They smile. They always smile. He writes daily, fills pages he doesn't remember starting. He signs his name at the bottom of every letter. Letters that find themselves in boxes outside new guest rooms. Yesterday, someone knocked on the door. He opened it and greeted the next guest. It arrived with the morning fog, tucked beneath a stack of unpaid invoices and legal drafts. Thomas Elridge almost missed it. A yellowed envelope, weathered at the corners, no seal, no return address. His name, hastily scribbled, was the only clue. He paused. Something about the ink made his stomach churn. It shimmered faintly, as though it had bled from a different time. Thomas's hands trembled slightly as he opened it. Not from fear, he told himself, but from the chill of the early April morning. Inside, only a few words in an unfamiliar hand. Come to the manor. She is not at rest. No signature, no date. Yet the message felt personal. It hit something inside him, a memory. Long ago, as a boy, he had wandered too close to Hurstmoor Manor during a family trip. He remembered its towering silhouette and the overwhelming silence surrounding it. The villagers avoided the place, and they never spoke of the widow. Against better judgment and the persistent ache in his gut, Thomas boarded a dusty old carriage to Hurstmoor. The driver was mute for most of the ride, his eyes fixated on the road, like he feared what might look back at him from the trees. As the forest thickened, the air changed, denser, older somehow. Time seemed to stretch, the path narrowing unnaturally, as if the land resisted the approach. The driver finally broke his silence when the crooked silhouette of the manor came into view. "I won't wait here," he said flatly. "Leave before nightfall." Thomas stepped down, met with a silence so deep it muffled even his thoughts. The manor loomed like a cathedral of rot. Ivy strangled its stone walls, and the roof sagged like a tired giant. Yet the front door opened with a sigh on its own, and so Thomas entered. The manor swallowed him. The door shut gently behind him, though he hadn't touched it. Dust hung in the air like smoke, catching the fading light from his lantern. Furniture stood frozen beneath white sheets, and the thick scent of mildew and ash filled his nose. His footsteps echoed strangely, not in front of him, but from behind, repeating themselves as though someone, or something, mimicked his movements. In the main hall, a fireplace sat dormant. Above it hung a portrait of Margaret Dandridge, painted in her final years. Her eyes, blue, brilliant, and unnervingly expressive, seemed to glisten as though wet. Thomas shivered. "Get a hold of yourself," he whispered. But just as he turned away, he heard it. A whisper, so faint he wasn't sure it wasn't imagined. "Thomas!" He spent the afternoon searching the manor. A mixture of dread and duty propelled him. In a small reading room behind the main hall, he found Margaret's private diary hidden behind a loose panel in the wall. The entries began plainly, discussing weather, loneliness, the collapse of the family estate. But over time, her words shifted. The lines became uneven, ink blotted, as though her hand had trembled violently. "He watches me at night," she wrote. "From the well, his voice seeps through the floorboards, mocking me." Several pages had been torn out, leaving ragged edges like wounds. Thomas read the final legible entry with a mounting chill. "He said he'd bring my love back, but not like this. I hear him breathing in the walls. The pact is broken, and now he waits." Driven by a mixture of morbid curiosity and a need to understand, Thomas sought out Margaret's bedroom. It was easy to find. It was the only door chained shut from the outside. The iron links were rusted, embedded into the frame. Beneath the door seeped a smell unlike anything he'd encountered, a combination of rotting flowers, decay, and something fouler, wet and ancient. He pressed his ear to the wood. At first, silence. Then faintly a dragging sound. Something heavy scraping across the floor, then stopping. His heart raced. He turned the key he had found in the diary compartment. Nothing happened. The lock didn't budge. He needed another key, or perhaps the will to break through. That night, unable to sleep, Thomas found himself drawn to the cellar. The air grew colder with each step downward. The stone beneath his boots was slick with age. At the center of the cellar sat the well. Its stone ring was cracked, moss crawling along its base. The wooden lid atop it had splintered and warped. He leaned forward cautiously. The lantern's glow barely pierced the darkness inside. Suddenly, a sound, laughter, low and guttural, rose from the depths. He jerked back, heart hammering. Then, unmistakably, a voice echoed from below. "She broke the pact. You must finish it." Thomas reeled, nearly dropping the lantern, and then, from the shadows beside him, a figure moved, quick, silent. He spun, but saw nothing. Later that night, the air inside the manor shifted. Every window rattled in unison. In the corridor outside his room, Thomas saw her, Margaret, or what used to be her. Her figure floated slightly above the ground, face pale and twisted, her mouth ajar in an eternal cry. She reached out a skeletal hand and placed an object into his, an iron key, warm to the touch. She whispered, "Don't let him out. Burn it all." Before Thomas could speak, she vanished, fading into the walls like smoke. With the key in hand, Thomas returned to the chain door. The key slid in with unnatural ease. The chains unraveled themselves, clinking to the floor. Inside, the room was untouched. A pristine bed, flowers in a vase, though the petals had long blackened. On the bed lay a figure in a wedding gown. Thomas approached, breath held. As he leaned in, the figure's eyes snapped open. "You came too late," she hissed. The voice was not Margaret's. The body rose, cracking at the joints. Her face twisted, mouth elongating into something grotesque. The pact must be paid. The house groaned violently, dust falling from the ceiling. Doors slammed shut, one after another. Shadows crept from corners, rising like smoke. Thomas ran, chased by shrieks and whispers. Faces flickered in mirrors. His own, but changed, twisted. He stumbled back into the study where the diary had been. There, the fire erupted on its own. Pages flew from the shelves, burning mid-air. He grabbed the diary and ran to the cellar. If the well was the origin, perhaps it was also the end. He threw the diary into the dark water. A scream echoed upward, piercing, inhuman. The air exploded with pressure. Cracks split the walls. Then silence. Thomas was found by villagers the next morning, collapsed in the mud outside the ruins of the manor. They claimed lightning struck it. He said nothing. He never returned to his legal practice. He would often mutter about voices in the walls and the man in the well. At night, he still hears the whispers. Some say the Dandridge Pact still lingers, that when the moon is high and the fog rolls low, Hurstmoor breathes again. The fire crackled in Dr. Elias Moore's study as a cold wind battered against the windows. It was January of 1864, and Charleston's streets were hushed under a sheath of frost. Elias had just returned from the hospital when he noticed the package, drenched in oil and wrapped in cloth that stank faintly of old blood, resting on his doorstep. No note, no courier. It was as though it had appeared there by its own will. Inside lay a battered leather journal, brittle at the edges, along with scorched newspaper clippings about disappearances in the Alleghenies. But what froze Elias mid-step was the unmistakable penmanship within the journal. It belonged to Josiah Brandt, his childhood companion and a prodigious scholar who had vanished 23 years ago. Elias had been there the night he disappeared. Josiah had ranted in near delirium, mumbling about illuminated flesh, the village where the clocks don't turn, and the glow that remembers. Then he ran into the storm and was never seen again. Elias never spoke of it, but now Josiah's journal was here, on his doorstep, as if the past had clawed its way back through time. The journal's opening line was enough to set Elias's pulse quickening. "If you are reading this, burn the pages. They can hear the words." Yet he couldn't bring himself to destroy it. The entries were disjointed at first, scratched in haste, as if written under duress. Josiah wrote of a village called Harrowick, tucked deep into the Allegheny wilderness, which did not appear on any map and could not be found by accident. The name sent a chill through Elias. It was one they used in ghost stories as boys, never realizing it was real. Josiah's words grew stranger. He described villagers who did not blink. Their skin remained smooth no matter their age, their eyes milky yet sharp. Lanterns burned in every home, but the light was not of oil or flame. It was of a pale, gelatinous tallow that gave off a cold blue hue. He wrote of its smell, sweet like rotting lilies, and the odd hum that followed its glow. Josiah became obsessed, returning night after night to observe the rituals, the waxings, the soft chants carried on winds that didn't blow. And then he wrote something that made Elias drop the journal. The light burns from them. They're fat, their memory, they render it, and it lives forever. Elias, rational man of science though he was, could not shake the journal's hold. He spent days in libraries, searching for any mention of Harrowick. Nothing. He interviewed fur traders, map makers, even aging Civil War deserters who had roamed the mountains. One man, gaunt and missing 3 fingers, leaned close and whispered, "You're looking for the place that don't breathe, ain't you?" He handed Elias a crude map, drawn on old parchment, with a spot marked by a strange symbol, a circle pierced by 3 needles. Follow the fog. When the sun fails but time don't, you'll find it. After weeks of travel on horseback through dense woods and mountain trails that seemed to double back unnaturally, Elias finally arrived. Harrowick emerged from the mist like a dream uncoiling, its wooden homes leaning, windows shuttered from within, and an eerie silence pressing on the trees. No birdsong, no insects, just a distant, almost imperceptible hum. And as night fell, pale lights blinked alive behind the frost-glazed glass panes, ghostly blue glows that didn't flicker. Elias realized the journal hadn't been an exaggeration. Josiah hadn't been mad. He had been honest. Elias wandered the village slowly, his breath clouding in the still air. The houses appeared occupied, yet no one emerged. Not until he entered the butcher's hut. The bell above the door let out a sound more like a sob than a chime. Inside, the scent of something sickly sweet mingled with blood. A man stood behind the counter, cleaving something unidentifiable. The meat was white, fibrous, veined with something too human to ignore. The man, tall, bald, his skin drooping like melted wax, looked up and smiled, revealing far too many teeth. "You've brought a thinking mind," he rasped. "They like those best." Elias stammered, trying to explain himself, but the butcher waved him off. "You follow the light now, same as your friend. Should have burned the pages." His eyes drifted to the church's bent steeple, black against the moonless sky. "It begins there. That's where they speak to the flame." When Elias turned to leave, the butcher said one final thing, almost mournfully. "Don't let them take your eyes, Doctor. That's where your name lives." The church was older than the village. Its stone was darker, the wood rotted at the touch. As Elias entered, the lanterns flared to life, each hanging from twisted chains like severed heads. Their light pulsed faintly, as if breathing. He walked down the aisle, and with each step, a pressure mounted in his skull. At the altar was a hatch in the floor, its lock rusted and broken. The passage below was narrow and wet, lined with stone that wept a thin film of fat. As Elias descended, the smell intensified, sweet, sharp, living. And then, the chamber opened. It was a slaughterhouse masquerading as a temple. Bodies hung from hooks, bodies that twitched. Tubes snaked into their torsos, slowly drawing translucent atoms from their flesh. Their eyes were open. A humming sound vibrated through the walls. In the center, tied to a chair, skin translucent and mouth sewn shut, was Josiah. Elias fell to his knees, tears streaming down as he touched his friend's hand. It was warm, alive, but hollow. A sudden creak. A figure emerged from the dark, a tall shape, robed in stitched skin, its face masked with cured flesh. The keeper. It did not walk. It glided. Its voice, when it spoke, echoed like wind through a corpse's throat. You understand now. What lights this village is not fire. It is memory rendered, essence extracted. We preserve them. Forever. Elias backed away, gasping. You're burning people. The keeper tilted its head. We burn what they were. In return, they forget pain, fear, death. And you, Doctor, carry so much light in you. The lanterns hissed above. Josiah moaned through his sewn mouth, eyes begging Elias to flee. But there was no way out. The stairs had sealed. Elias awoke in a cottage he didn't recognize. His clothes were clean. His journal was gone. On the table, a lantern pulsed softly with pale light. He stared at it, realizing the glow seemed familiar. The warmth it gave off was oddly comforting, but it also pulsed with his heartbeat. From outside, a low chant drifted on the wind. He stepped to the window. Villagers circled a stone slab in the square. Upon it writhed something human-shaped, gagged, blindfolded. Elias watched as the keeper approached it with a needle-like blade. The chanting rose, and as the blade entered the figure's side, the lanterns around the village flared in unison. Elias screamed, not for the figure, but because he felt the pain too. It was him. Somehow part of him had been taken, copied, preserved, and now it burned. Days passed, or so it felt. Elias wandered the village, never sleeping, never eating, but always awake. The villagers now greeted him like a neighbor, smiles that never reached their eyes, children that never blinked. No matter how far he walked, the woods turned him back. There was no edge, no border, just lanterns. He found Josiah once more, not in the church, but sitting on a porch, knitting quietly. His face was calm now, blank. He looked up at Elias and said only one thing. The longer you stay, the less you remember. Soon, you'll forget why you ever feared it. And Elias felt it, pieces of himself loosening, names, places, his sister's face, gone, all replaced by a single glow, cold, eternal.